Hello everyone, amateur meteorologist First and Weather here. It is August 25th, 2020, and we now have Hurricane Laura, which is now looking very good on the satellite picture. You can see a nice eye starting to form. It was a little bit more evident a bit earlier. It's now being a little shrouded by the large areas of convection around it, but I do expect it to become more well organized and better looking and healthier looking in the next 12 to 18 hours or so, as you really start to see the system enter some very favorable conditions for rapid intensification. You can see a distinct circulation here, lots of nice streamer bands around the system indicating its strength and potency. And definitely this system is expanding and looks very healthy on the radar picture. Now, if we look at the official NOAA track for Hurricane Laura, you can see this is a 4 p.m. advisory. It's moving west-northwest at 17 miles per hour, so it is moving a bit briskly, which will help to just slightly hamper its intensification a bit. And it also has now maximum sustained winds at 80 miles per hour, so that's a bit of a jump from the 75 miles per hour we had in the previous advisory. And as you can see, it is expected to maintain hurricane strength and then even strengthen into major hurricane status right before landfall, which would be a Category 3 hurricane or higher. In this case, the National Weather Service is having this as a Category 3 at landfall. However, I think there certainly is a good chance that this could be a Cat 3 or maybe even a Cat 4 when it makes landfall. And as you can see, we do have hurricane warnings stretching all the way from the Houston coastline back through the central portions of the Louisiana coastline. But I do think this track is a bit too far to the east. When you look at some of the models and the consistent southwestward trend and southwestward verification, it becomes clear that this system is being portrayed as tracking a bit too far to the east because the GFS and all the hurricane models, which are based off that, are having that ridge a little bit weaker than what has been verifying. And still right now, when you look at the ensemble plots, the actual center of the storm is actually south of where that is. And so I do think the most likely area for landfall will be right around here. And again, that doesn't mean that the impacts won't be outside of the circle. Of course, the impacts will be ranging for hundreds of miles east and west, particularly in the eastern part of the storm where conditions are strongest, and especially as it starts to enter it starts to enter the continental lower 48. But then, as you can see, the National Weather Service then does expect this to weaken into tropical storm strength and then quickly make a rightward turn. And some of the models actually have it making an even sharper right hook turn before maybe re-intensifying off the Mid-Atlantic coastline and then going out to sea. So now if we look at the ensemble plots, again, these are all the hurricane models, but they're based off the GFS, and the GFS has been consistently weaker with that ridge right here than what has been verifying. And in fact, the center of the storm is actually about 50 miles south of where the ensemble plots are starting. So again, I think the highest risk for landfall is going to be in the eastern Texas area, specifically right around or east of Houston. I definitely think the risk there is much higher than a landfall on the Texas border. So I definitely think if you're out here, you need to pay careful attention to the forecast and be aware that things are about to get very nasty in the next couple of days. If we look at the intensity, the models are again now starting to gradually creep up their intensity forecasts. You can see what was previously some of the models were forecasting a Cat 2, now more and more creeping up into the Category 3 range, and I expect this trend to continue as conditions really are very favorable for rapid intensification right before landfall. Now here is the European Ensemble. You can see that it has pressure at 992 millibars. Of course, this is much higher than what the landfall pressure will be because this is the Ensemble model, but you can see that the Ensemble has landfall in the eastern Texas area, not the border or in Louisiana. So I think this is a good idea. The Ensemble has a good idea when it comes to landfall because it does have that ridge stronger than what the GFS is showing, and it does have landfall west of the Texas border. Switching to the GFS Ensemble, you can see it is a bit further to the east, just slightly, but it also has about the same idea as the European with a landfall in the eastern portion, or the extreme eastern portion of Texas. So I think Houston, those areas really need to start preparing now because things definitely look like they're about to get very bad there. Now here is one thing I want to show you. You can see the darker the line gets, the more recent the forecast, and you can see that consistent westward trend. For example, first the models were showing that landfall here, but now the most recent ones are starting to catch up and showing landfall in eastern Texas, and that's what we've been seeing the entire time. The storm center actually verifying further south and west to what the models were actually showing. And I think finally now we have a good idea of where the landfall is going to occur because the models have a good idea of where the center is. You can see that the forecast track is no longer to the north of where the actual center is. It's the actual center is in a relatively good position. It's right over that forecast track, and as you can see, it does take it into the eastern portion of Texas, right around the border. But I do think there is potential for this to go up just a bit to the west, impacting more of Houston, with that ridge being verifying slightly stronger. If we look at the other models, this is the British model. It's actually shifted a bit further to the east after previous runs took it well into the Houston area. But I do think this is a good idea of landfall right around this region. And now if we look at the HighRes European, you can see it has a very strong system. It portrays Laura as a strong Category 4 hurricane when it makes landfall with a pressure of 937 millibars. This is probably a bit overdone, but again, it makes the point that this system does have very good potential for rapid intensification, rapid strengthening, and major hurricane status. Now if we switch gears to the HWRF model, it also shows a very intense Category 3 hurricane making landfall right along the border. Again, I think this is a bit too far to the east, but you get the idea. This will be a very strong hurricane, regardless of whether it's a Category 3 or a Category 4 when it makes landfall. And now the consensus for that is growing. If we look at it actually at the European 3-hour gusts, you can see it's showing a peak gust of 186 miles per hour just to the east of Houston. So I think eastern suburbs of Houston, even the downtown areas, might get blasted by some very strong winds, especially right along and west of the border of Texas. Wind gusts easily reaching 160 miles per hour. I think this is a bit overdone, but I think wind gusts of 160 miles per hour are not out of the question, and that this system will have very strong winds upon making landfall, especially because it will be strengthening right before making landfall. And now this right here is the GEFS or the GFS Ensemble, and this is showing the upper level winds. As you can see, we do have a bit of a jet streak right here, the subtropical jet going from southwest to northeast here, and this actually are the remnants of Marco. But what you can see is the system is getting pretty strong, and it does create a nice anticyclonic flow around it in the upper levels, and this does help to actually push this shear a bit further to the northwest, and it does look like this area of shear that will be right along the coastline will be retreating as this system moves to the north and west. So I think the wind shear is very low. As you can see, very little wind shear right around Laura, and that is perfect for intensification and strengthening. And if we look at one other graphic right here, you can see that this is where Laura is right now. It's an almost zero shear, very favorable for intensification. And as you can see, we do have some pretty good shear here, but again, that is expected to retreat to the north and west as this gets closer and closer to the coast. And here are the sea surface temperatures. So again, with combined with those very low wind shear values and very warm sea surface temperature anomalies and very warm temperatures overall, it really is just a perfect environment for strengthening. The only thing that I see that could maybe limit this system's potential is the speed at which it's moving at, which is a bit faster than normal for most hurricanes and tropical systems. But I think with the very warm SST temperatures and also the very low wind shear, it should be able to quickly evade that and overcome that. And so if we look at some of the impacts, this is the European high-res rainfall forecast. You can see a wide swath, 50 to 70 mile band of 6 to 10 inches of rain potentially, and then around that 3 to 6 inches of rain stretching all the way from western portions of Louisiana all the way to the Houston metro area. So again, I think this is a very serious system right here. We got lucky with Marco, but Laura is really starting to look like a very nasty system that definitely is going to bring a lot of impacts. And if we look at the storm surge values are very significant, 9 to 13 feet in this area right here. You can see a bit of that bow echo right here, which will really help to force some of that water in. And I think the worst storm surge will be right around here on the east side of that system as Laura makes landfall somewhere in the eastern, extreme eastern portion of Texas. So I think storm surge will definitely be very significant here. You're going to have lots of inland flooding, and coupled with some very heavy rain. So I think the flooding risk is very high, like it usually is in a system of this magnitude. And accordingly, the National Weather Service does have moderate risks for flash flooding. And this, of course, I think will go up to the high risk because of the system. And so that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Again, I think Hurricane Laura right now is going to be a very strong hurricane by the time this makes landfall. And again, for clarification, it is expected to make landfall sometime very early Thursday morning, if not late Wednesday night as a major hurricane. I would not be surprised if it makes landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. That some of the models are showing that, but I think there's about a 65% chance that this will make landfall as a strong Cat 3. But I think very high potential for extreme winds, lots of rain, and I do think the greatest risk area will be right here. Okay, so I think the landfall will likely be in eastern Texas, extreme eastern Texas, about 30 to 40 miles west of the Texas border, bringing lots of rain and some very strong winds. So stay safe, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Got the main facts about the system, and I'll see you next time.